Well, welcome back again. And again, here we've got another topic here for you that we're going to take a stab at. And I want to just make sure that I've got it right here. And the title requested by the party in question was, what happens to the emotional body after heart center awakening? Good topic. I like that one. All right. And again, this is a request. We're going to give it a blast. And the first thing that I'm going to say here is this is I want to emphasize to everybody at this particular point, again, for the umpteenth time, that the greatest event on this planet in all of history, with the greatest of influence, magnitude, importance, and significance in the evolution of human consciousness, has happened. Nothing now or in the coming months, days, and years will supersede this event. Anything that comes up will be in very minor significance and importance after that. And that event happened en masse back in the 1980s, somewhere around about there, where a huge wave of individuals on this planet were gifted with the event called heart center activation. With that event, the possibility of the human experience being catapulted in a relatively short space of time into the higher echelons of consciousness and creative abilities was exemplified, ignited, and initiated. And at that particular point became the possibility of, just as the opportunity was given for so much potential creative expansion and development, on the opposite side of the coin, there was just as much danger on the opposite side of the coin as it to become dysfunctional and destructive. Fortunately, through the event of the heart center activation, which people still can't seem to understand, of the magnitude and the importance of it, they still keep sitting around waiting for something else that's going to happen, that is the event, to the point of prophesying and saying every month, every week, a new event, a new significance, a new something is coming. And in reality, that event was the heart center activation. That activation is happening in waves, all right? It did not happen to the whole of our society all at the same time. It happened for a group of individuals who were ready for it at that particular point in time. And it has not happened yet in some continents and countries because they're so very backward in consciousness and they're not at the point where they're ready for it. However, be that as it may, those that have already experienced the event and are midway through the evolution of consciousness are now reflecting, enhancing, and expediting the process for those who have not begun by setting a pattern and a template for them that they can focus into and tap into through group consciousness. Now, due to the heart center activation and event, another magical thing happened, which nobody seems to notice with any great degree. And that is the sublimation, assimilation, and the complete remodeling of the emotional body in the human condition. How do I mean that? If an individual who has experienced the event, and usually now the event consists of when the heart center activation takes place, because we are so deeply mired in a limited perspective of relationship, it entails another person. And the other person acts as the catalyst to awaken within the individual heart center activation, stimulates the Kundalini energy, which stimulates the sexual energy, and then, in a short space of time, all hell breaks loose. And the person goes through a stage and a period of complete crisis in their life where everything that they knew and thought and believed in more or less is scattered to the wind like leaves. And they begin to reform a new state of consciousness. But along the way, another important sequence of events takes place. With the activation of the heart center chakra, the dominance of the emotional body in the human species is now coming to an end. We have been for millennia dominated by a secondary state of consciousness that functions as a second brain within the emotional body. And there are actually even organs in the body that correspond to the second brain phenomena, literally. So what happens? As the activation of the heart center takes place within the physical body, there were initially, for a great many individuals, symptoms, physical symptoms, that you were aware that something was taking place. A spin, a warmth, a heaviness, difficulty in breathing, all sorts of physical symptoms were taking place. At the same time, what was coming up was a barrage of emotional content, probably never experienced by the individual in question at any point in time in their life to such a magnitude and degree of intensity. What was happening? What was happening is the emotional body was being tilled, literally tilled for a change, a very significant, a very important, and a change that had to happen to the human experience. And that was the sublimation of the emotional body to the heart center chakra. And how did that happen? At a point where the greater amount of restrictive, imbalanced, dysfunctional, inappropriate, and I'm going to call them buttons or triggers. Now, when I say buttons or triggers, you have to, for the moment, view the emotional body as a vast reservoir of energy. But the way that state of consciousness functions is through these triggers. And these triggers are initiated or embedded in there over a period of time through belief systems, through indoctrination, through whatever peer input is necessary to get it there. And what happens is all of the most dramatic things in our life that have happened are through some sort of emotional stimuli, if I can put it that way. Anything that we've done that's stupid or totally ridiculous is a response from the emotional body. When we feel pain or passion, we feel it from the emotional body. When we feel anger and joy, it comes from the emotional body. So what has happened is this. As the heart center began to expand and it became dominant, you're dealing with now a state where you are in two states of consciousness. You have the state of consciousness where source creative energy, many people still call it unconditional love, But that's okay for now. They'll change. Source creative energy begins to radiate, penetrate, impregnate every molecular part of the body, every cellular part of the body, every organ of the body, every portion of the emotional body, every portion of the mental body, and the etheric body, and begins subtly to activate sheet bodies that to this particular point in time that have been there as a template but inactive, and also adding in a 12 chakra system. Now, the vehicle being the human incarnated in physical reality in this timeline is now fully involved in the most important and significant event that they will ever experience or have ever experienced at anywhere, in any timeline, in any dimension, at any point in any of their existences. And that is the assimilation of the emotional body as the dominant state of consciousness. So, what happens beyond the point at this point? The heart center chakra, as it begins to, initially in the beginning, pull up all of these emotions and begin to express them, is setting up a process or a means to shift domination of consciousness from the solar plexus to the heart center. How does it do this? What it does is somewhere in the transition of each person, there is a stream, if I can put it in those words, of energy, which begins to pull up from the solar plexus area, up the front of the center of the chest, and many individuals have felt this happening, and accompanying systems of a spinning or a nauseous feeling within the stomach that can go on for weeks and months, and in some cases even years for some people, and is pulled up into the heart center chakra. At this point, what is happening with no participation or control of the individual in question at this point, it is being assimilated into the heart center, it is being spun in the heart center, and all of the, I'm not going to say dysfunctional patterns, but all of the patterns and templates, ideologies, belief systems, etc., 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 that are not conducive to a multidimensional being becoming or filtered out through the system by being expended out of the back of the heart center chakra as trash. Short and simple. Then the energy is reassimilated back through the system. As this process continues, and it continued for an extended period of time, the emotional body then becomes clearer. And as it becomes clearer, it no longer dominates, but becomes a vast reservoir of energy that can be used for creative and co-creative endeavors. So the transition of the event that has been taking place for many years now in many individuals is now reaching the apex of becoming a co-creative multidimensional being in a physical body. So as this process continues, what the individual would notice is they no longer express feelings, if that's the appropriate word, the way that they used to before. They can feel anger or be upset, but it doesn't manifest the way it used to. They could feel upset, but it would feel as a presentation or an emanation through the heart center chakra. So the reaction that would happen would be different. They simply would get to the point where something that used to make them angry suddenly doesn't seem to bother them anymore. And they would be at the point where they would realize that something significant has happened to them, a very, 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 very important change. They're reacting differently. And this would go along with other feelings jealousy, racism, any type of feeling that can be labeled as any kind of expression of consciousness emanating from the solar plexus, all right, can then be brought up and purged, assimilated through the heart center chakra, and it becomes totally different. So inevitably, what is happening is the whole of humanity in different segments and at different times is now being brought into a state of consciousness that is no longer dominated by the solar plexus, but is now dominated by the heart center chakra. Now, prior to this, we were a thinking species dominated by the solar plexus emotional body. And now we're going to be a species with a highly evolved capacity for thinking, but the energy supplied to it is now emanating from the source creative center in the middle of the chest, adding in the emotional energy of the emotional body, which maintains us in three-dimensional reality, but now expressing consciousness through a different venue of non-triggers, non-input, non-belief systems, non-psychological makeup of our personality that was there prior to. So in essence, we are becoming a modified species of highly elevated consciousness with free will. Yes, free will. What we had before was not free will. What we will have now in that expression is the ability to express free will from an elevated state of consciousness that is not dominated by the emotional triggers and patterns of the emotional body, yet has access to that universal three-dimensional energy of the emotional body, which can be brought up and expressed as consciousness, as personality, as a multitude of aspects of a spiritual multidimensional being of high caliber, high intelligence, and high creative abilities, but without the destructive patterns of the emotional body that has been predominantly dominated by the human excursion, wrong word, by the human intrusion of individuals programming, literally, through political indoctrination, educational system, religious indoctrinations of all kinds. The individual in question will move into a sense of freedom that is evolved beyond the limiting factors of the three-dimensional emotional body aspect of consciousness through the emotional body that has dominated us as a society and us as a species on this planet, which is a good thing. Had we remained the way we were, we would probably have destroyed ourselves in the next 5 or 6 decades. Now, the shift is on. The event has taken place. And all of this is transitioning at this particular point in time. So the emotional body, which still keeps us in three-dimensional reality, is now serving its true purpose, and that is as a reservoir of energy. So where does this energy come from that is a reservoir within the three-dimensional body? Every day you take in food. Every day you take in sunlight. Every day in some form or some way you are filtering, even with your breath, taking in energy. That energy from all of these sources is now stored within this reservoir of the emotional body, while you are in the physical. And once you leave the physical, whenever that time may be, if that's to happen, you no longer need that reservoir of the emotional body, and you simply cast it off. While you are here, it is necessary because it gives you the opportunity to express the three-dimensional experience, but at the same time experience the evolution of humanity into higher states of consciousness and express through a co-creative chakra, which is now the dominant force within you, which at this point can then enhance the functions of both hemispheres of the brain, left and right, and catapult you into higher states of consciousness with a safe reserve of energy and three-dimensional reality that is nurtured by the emotional body, now taking in these sources of energy which are manifest in 3D. Now, how much more simple can I make this? I hope that was to your understanding. And to add to it at this particular point, it is very important at this point for everyone, irrespective of what may be going on in your life and at what stage of the heart center awakening you are at, that you understand that you need to nurture the gift that's been given to you. You need to work with it to supply it with a reasonable amount of time in any given day for it to continue with the work that it's doing. That means, beyond a shadow of a doubt, everyone who is going through a heart center awakening should, in my opinion, be meditating 10 to 15 minutes at least every day, 7 days a week without fail. You must allow a sacred period of time during each 24-hour cycle to allow the heart center, which is the gift that has been given to you, the most important thing in your life that's been given to you, give it some time to itself, by itself, for itself, to work with you in the physical reality, to allow it to accomplish what it needs to do. If you do not, what happens is you experience the things that are going to happen spontaneously and erratically, and they can be very disoriented and very uncomfortable, because a lot of the changes that take place also correspondingly to the emotional body becoming the vast reservoir. What also has to happen is, because you are shifting from the dominance of the emotional body to the heart center source creator essence of self, the whole of the digestive system is going to change. Why? Because you don't need the emotional body to have the sustenance or the intake that it did in the way that it did, so it has to refine a lot of the organs of the body. This is what takes place during this time of meditation, contemplation, or spending time with the evolutionary process in a sacred period for yourself, all right? It shows your appreciation for being given the gift. You're allowing it time to work through you and with you, and you're giving time, which is even more important, for the body to adjust to the changes that have been forthcoming on any 15 or 20 minute or 10-minute time frame that you have taken out of your day, which is full of frivolous and unimportant activities in comparison to this magnificent event that is taking place in your embodiment and gifted to you so you can become a co-creator. 10 to 15 minutes every day, without exception. I hope I have impressed you with the significance and the importance of the awakened heart center and the aspect of nurturing that aspect. It will prove to be positive in every way, shape, or form down the road. Thank you very much for your time, and I enjoyed doing this video. Have a great day, everyone. Love you all.